What's up everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of the Slosher guide. My name is Gus, and for this video, we'll be going over the Deco variant of the Slosher. If you haven't watched part 1, I strongly recommend watching it because it covers in detail techniques about the main weapon. But no worries, if you're unable to do that, I'll briefly recap some of the aspects in this video. If you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, comment, and subscribe. Someone told me in my last video that there was a rumor going around for the number of likes this video gets, there's gonna be several Slosher Deco mains blessed with hitting an insane triple with Zipcaster and X-Battle. So let's smash that like button to make those rumors come true and help more Slosher mains find this video on YouTube. Once again, a big thank you to Pika for helping out with the development of this video. Be sure to give them a follow on YouTube as well. With that out of the way, let's get started on this video. Alright, before going into the specifics about the Slosher Deco, let's briefly recap the main weapon's strengths, the weaknesses, and advanced techniques that we discussed in part 1. If you already watched part 1, click on this timestamp below to get started on learning about the Slosher Deco. Alright, so the main weapon itself is really strong. It has high damage and good range, making it a good slayer for your team composition. It does a maximum of 70 damage with its tail end damage doing 50. So any combination of these two hits will get you a 2-shot splat. It has good range where it outranges most short range slayers. The unique thing about this class is how its projectiles interact with obstacles on the map. So Slosher is able to hit people behind walls and ledges, and it drops their health significantly, which can help you in getting those picks, putting pressure, or assisting your teammates in fights. So even though it has these strengths, it does have some notable drawbacks with its slow mobility, slow firing rate. It can be an ink-hungry weapon when compared to other frontline slayers that you'll be likely fighting. Sloshers are also unique compared to the other buckets because it's able to manipulate the straight slosh into curved sloshes. This is what we call flicking. No other Slosher can do this technique. It's very useful for tight situations where you need to react quickly and cover a wide range of area to protect you or damage the enemy. Someone also brought up in the comments in my last video that it's really good at confirming picks on super jumps before they even land. So with the Slosher, all you simply have to do is throw one slosh into the air, one in the middle, where the super jump is landing, so that way the opponent lands directly into the two sloshes. Just know that this might not always work if the person has drop roller or if they're a dually player. Alright everybody, let's start off with the basics. Since Splatoon 1, the second variant of the Slosher has always been the Deco variant. The way you know it's the Deco variant was that it would be the same color as the Slosher with the Deco sticker on the side. But Splatoon 3 changed that by giving it a cool black and blue color scheme, and I really like this one. It makes it distinct and it doesn't feel like a copy-paste color scheme, which I really enjoy. This kit comes with Angle Shooter, which I'll refer to as Marker, and Zipcaster. In my opinion, the Deco variant has always opened up new possibilities for the main weapon. In the past, the Deco variant received Splash Wall and Kraken in Splatoon 1, and Sprinkler and Baller in Splatoon 2, opening up new playstyles for this particular weapon. The key difference between the Vanilla Slosher and the Slosher Deco is that the Deco is the more aggressive one out of the two. The main weapon itself already has Slayer tendencies, but the Vanilla Slosher has a kit that allows it to play a defensive role if needed. It has a Splat Bomb that can stall, poke, and cause lethal damage, and has a special that is able to stall and take up space to pressure the opponent. On the other hand, for the Slosher Deco, the kit takes an alternative approach in complementing the main weapon. For this variant, offense is the best defense. So to understand the playstyle of this weapon, we have to take a closer look at how we should be using the sub and the special with the main weapon. Let's start off with the sub. The Marker, which has seen a good set of buffs since the beginning of the game, is the sub for the Slosher Deco. Marker is a sub that travels quickly in a straight line, bouncing off surfaces, and can damage and mark enemies. When the opponent is directly hit by the Marker, it does 35 damage to the enemy. If an enemy were to touch any part of the Marker's line, they'll be tagged for 5 seconds and be identified on the map like if they were tagged by a point sensor. Whenever it hits a surface, it creates a patch of ink. It also is really ink efficient, with a 40% ink consumption. Knowing this information, there are 3 things to remember to maximize the synergy between the main weapon and the sub, and that's to get picks, improve your movement, and recon. First, because the marker does 35 damage, 1 marker and 1 direct slosh of 70 damage combos to get the pick on the opponent. This is basically your bread and butter to this variant. The sub deploys considerably fast, so if you find yourself in tight situations where you can't get a second slosh but have a good angle on the opponent, throw a marker. It deploys faster than your main weapon's second slosh. It also has some other attributes that make it unique, and that's the sub's ability to bounce off surfaces. Because the sub bounces off walls, you can finish someone off even if you're not looking directly at them. And even if the opponent is pretty far away, the sub has really long range, about 50% more than an E-liter. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where you hit an opponent with 70 damage and they back up, just know the marker has sufficient range to finish them off if they're outside of your main weapon's range. In addition to the combo designed to getting you picks, the sub also helps out with your movement. This sub has seen several buffs since the beginning of the game, and one of the more recent ones that came in version 3.1.0 is a huge help to Slosher. In this update, it roughly doubled the radius of the ink that occurs when you hit the marker on a ground or on a surface. Because of this, when you're in a tight situation and you need to paint your feet immediately or swim towards a certain direction, throw a line marker in that area and it instantly gives you a patch of paint to swim in. Slosher may never get Burst Bomb again, but given the qualities of this sub, it's showing little by little that marker can be that healthy replacement for Slosher to give it its combo capabilities back and its movement capabilities back. And even taking all of that away, another good thing about the marker is that you're able to recon with it. If you don't know where an enemy is, either because they're sharking or because they have Ninja Squid, you could use the sub to recon. Throw them in an area where it can create a tripwire of sorts to track opponents. This will help you in how you approach enemies to pick someone off. The creativity and possibilities you can have with this sub is infinite. Something I also think is important to remember is that marker minimizes one of the weaknesses of Slosher. As I mentioned before in part 1 and in the recap section, Slosher tends to be pretty ink hungry with a total of 14 sloshes. Looking at the Vanilla Slosher for example, a Splat Bomb takes up 70% of your ink tank, which adds onto the kit's ink inefficiency. But with the Slosher Deco, it has a sub that is really ink efficient for the main weapon, minimizing one of its potential weaknesses. Marker only takes 40% of your ink, so if you throw 1 marker, you'll still have a total of 8 remaining sloshes. If you throw 2 markers, you have 2 remaining sloshes. This is all under the assumption that you're not using any ink efficiency builds. While this sub does have some nice complementary niches for the Slosher, there are some notable drawbacks to this specific sub. First, the sub's reticle may feel a bit weird. The reticle may not always line up with the sub, so even if you're looking at the opponent, depending on the angle that you're looking at, it may be thrown a bit off from where the enemy actually is. It's also important to know that because it bounces, you need to be wary of certain terrain. Any small bump could change the trajectory of the sub. And I will say that these 2 weaknesses should be the least of your concerns because with practice and awareness, these 2 issues can be minimized. Another one of its weaknesses is that it's not lethal and it does have low damage. So if you're going from a Vanilla Slosher to a Slosher Deco for example, there's obviously going to be some trade-off. The sub does 35 damage, meaning it can't do the same amount of damage as Splat Bomb could, and it has a narrower hitbox in comparison to it. That means it could be more difficult to poke and apply chip damage when on neutral or defense. You won't really have a lethal poking sub to get you in or turn the tides from a distance. If you're getting pressured from a distance, from a charger, from a heavy, this sub will not be the best in comparison to others to apply pressure. It can also be countered with sub defense up. If the enemy is wearing at least 1 main of sub defense up, it reduces the marker's damage to 29.7. But this isn't a huge concern, at least in competitive play. It's pretty uncommon to see people use a main's worth of sub defense up, but if you ever experience a slosh of 70 damage and a sub and not confirming the pick, This is probably the reason why. And one sub of sub defense sub, which is pretty common in competitive play, not only reduces the damage by a little bit, but it also reduces the duration of the tracker by 1 second. So any form of sub defense sub will impact the damage and tracking of the marker somehow. So remember, always use the strengths of your weapon. In this case, use the Slosher markers combo for picks, recon, and help you with movement. The sub has pretty good range, bounces off wall. You're bound to find someone sharking, or you can use that information to help your team track someone. Alright everyone, I think we've talked about line marker long enough. Let's move on to talking about one of the new specials in Splatoon 3, the Zipcaster. This is honestly one of my favorite specials because of how complex and fun it is. This special turns you into a Greninja looking character where you can temporarily stretch your arm to quickly grapple to surfaces. Every grapple to a surface causes damaging explosions on impact. One direct impact causes 95 damage, and one indirect impact, depending on how far away the enemy is from you, causes around 30 to 60 damage. When you press the R button towards the wall, you can cling onto the wall and press B to hop with the special. This is really important to know because with hopping, it gives you more height, which could potentially be helpful in throwing a slosh above a wall or gaining more distance between you and the enemy so you can throw a slosh towards them. Just know that hopping only works on walls, so you can't do this on a floor, for example. When you travel with the grapple, you temporarily get armor, but the armor can be pierced, and you can be splatted if you're low on health, or if the weapon that you're fighting against has enough damage to pierce through the armor, so for example a charger. This special only lasts for 12 seconds, but if you use your main weapon or grapple, it'll deplete how long the special lasts. So be conscious of your ink usage when using this special. Once this special is over, you're pulled back to the location when you first used the Zipcaster. Based on this information, Zipcaster can be used for several things such as scouting picks, getting access to high ground, moving quickly to key locations, distracting the opponent. Honestly, Zipcaster definitely deserves its own video given how unique the special is. But for the sake of time, let's just focus on how Slosher should be using it. Because each Zipcaster weapon can use different properties of the special, and it's up to you on what you want to do. But with Slosher Deco in particular, we want to capitalize on the Slosher's high damage and good range, and ability to hit people behind walls and ledges in coordination with the Zipcaster's quick movement to key locations to apply pressure on the enemy. One way to use this special is to gain access to high ground or to key locations that would not be easily accessible to displace or pick off the opponents. Luckily, because of the 3.1.0 update, Slosher got a huge buff that helps you in maximizing the strengths of the Zipcaster. In this update, it adjusted the damage falloff rate when a player attacks someone vertically lower than them. Due to this change, the minimum amount of damage dealt to an opponent will be 50. Before this update, if you were in a high location, hitting enemies below you would be such a struggle. You would suffer from bad falloff damage with Slosher to the point where you might need 3 or even 4 sloshes to get the splat. But fortunately, this update makes it so you only need 2 sloshes now. Regardless of where you are, if you're clinging behind a wall, below a ledge, on high ground, you can throw your sloshes up in the air or below, abuse the different type of angles, and still pressure the opponent. There's so much you can do with this special. And sometimes, just distracting your opponents is enough to help you and your team. You don't always have to go for the pick. You can use this special to draw the enemy's eyes towards you, allowing your team to move in or capitalize on the objective. If there's a backline putting pressure on the team carrying the Rainmaker, use the Zipcaster to potentially distract the enemy to let your teammates gain more points. Lastly, remember that the Zipcaster itself is able to deal damage to the opponent. You could hit a direct impact damage for 95 with the Zipcaster, or even indirect damage for a minimum of 30, and all you need is 1 slosh to finish them off. Sometimes you could just grapple back and forth to finish the person off. Analyze the situation and make those judgments. Zipcaster is a special where it's up to you as the user to maximize the synergy between the main and the special. But you're going to be vulnerable with this special, to be honest with you. One of its weaknesses is its vulnerability and the recall. If the enemy is fast enough, they could shoot you down before you're able to do anything with this special. And even if they don't shoot you down while your special is active, this special has a recall with a display marker that anyone, including the enemy, can see. An enemy can camp your recall spot and take you out when you super jump back to where you started. These two weaknesses though can be minimized with a couple of things. First, with practice, you'll get used to zipping to areas where enemies can't easily shoot you. Become familiar with the range of the enemy weapons. That'll give you an idea of how you should be approaching them. Try also popping the Zipcaster behind areas where the enemy can't easily see you. Start off behind the block, a ledge, or on high ground where no one can see your spot. Just know if you get hit by enemy ink, the enemy can open up their map, see your recall spot, and potentially throw a bomb in that direction. Even if you do pop the Zipcaster out in the open, if you're voice chatting with friends, use yourself as bait. Call out to your teammates to help you take out that person who's camping your spot. You could also equip Drop Roller if you want to avoid getting picked off on your recalls. This ability could have the opportunity to save your life. Lastly, one of its weaknesses, and like I said before, I think practice makes perfect, this special is very difficult to master, which makes it even more daunting when you already have a difficult main weapon to master. It is not as simple as popping 10 missiles, locking on the opponent, and there you go. With this special, you need to know how to grapple, how to hop with the special, how to cling onto the walls, all while using your main weapon alongside it. So it does take some time to get used to. My key advice is to practice, know you have 12 seconds on your end, and be aware of your ink usage as it'll deplete your special. In part 1, I also mentioned that Slosher loves maps with a lot of cover, so Mako Mart, Flounder Heights, those are going to be your beloved maps. But I highly recommend that you recon maps while using Zipcaster. There are some maps like Museum and Manta Maria where you can use the special to get into common enemy spots or some very unusual spots that the enemy wouldn't suspect you coming. The more you use the special, the more you will find out that there are some really good parts on the map that you want to take advantage of, but unfortunately, there are some places, even though there's a wall, you'll be unable to grapple. For example, on certain sides of Hagglefish Market and Undertow, you're unable to grapple on these walls. This could put you in an awkward situation where you're trying to grapple, but you end up getting picked off because of wasted time. I highly recommend watching Fusion's Zipcaster video. They go over in depth on how to use the Zipcaster, all while showing a wide variety of Zipcaster spots you may want to consider in the gameplay. I have the link to the video in the description below, so be sure to check that out. Alright, in part 1, I mentioned that any Slosher benefits from having teammates who paint extremely well or can provide chip damage to help you get that one slosh pick. So having a junior or a splash who consistently paints, chucks bombs towards your area, will always help a Slosher thrive during those 1v1s. The key difference in team compositions for the Vanilla Slosher and the Slosher Deco is the special. Zipcaster is an aggressive special that can do a variety of things as we went over, whereas Tri-Strike, as we discussed in part 1, it's more of a displacement special. So you want to be careful about how you're developing your team composition to make sure that the Zipcaster doesn't duplicate another special's purpose. So for example, you want to give Zipcaster some specials it can pair well with. 10 missiles could be a great special that not only helps the Zipcaster see and head towards the enemies locked on by the missiles could provide some chip damage to help the Zipcaster use a direct grapple for the pick. You basically want specials that help provide additional pressure while the Zipcaster is scouting for picks, for example. So missiles, crab tank, booyah bomb, triple ink strike, all of these specials force people to move and apply pressure, which can make it easier for you to get those splats. When I say you don't want to put specials with similar motives on the same comp, think of having an inkjet and a Zipcaster on the same team composition. It could be difficult because both specials are attempting to accomplish the same thing, force people out and pick people off. Special balance is important to consider when designing team compositions. There are always exceptions to these recommendations, of course. If it works, it works. You could have an Ultra Stamp and a Zipcaster all on the same team. But remember, that's what the aspect of team composition is always about. you take into consideration different elements of each weapon. The main weapon, the sub, and the special, you find the synergy. If a Splatana Wiper and a Slosher Deco work together, then it works together. This is the process of labbing and trying things out. Of the two Sloshers we've had so far, Slosher Deco is clearly the more aggressive kit, so because of this playstyle, it's probably a better idea to invest in more quick respawn for this particular variant, because you're probably going to be going for a lot of picks and you may die more. You also have the option to either use Stealth Jump or Drop Roller as we discussed previously. Stealth Jump is just overall one of the best abilities in the game, granting you the chance to not be spotted by the enemy team when you're super jumping to your teammate. But as I mentioned before, having Drop Roller can be extremely helpful in those situations when your recall is being camped. I do not recommend using Special Power Up for this particular special. Special Power Up decreases the Zipcaster grapple ink consumption and increases the duration of the special. While this could be helpful, I do think that the time afforded to the Zipcaster is enough. The cool thing about this special is that you go in, you go out. Increasing your time could lead you to creating more pressure, but you also have to remember the more time you are zip casting, the more you are vulnerable while zipping around. Lastly, you could also consider using Ink Saver main. Interestingly, because the Zipcaster's duration is tied to the main weapon's ink consumption, this ability does have an impact on the special. This ability could help. It does not have the same impact compared to Special Power Up, but with this ability, you're getting the benefit of it helping your main weapon and during Zipcaster. Overall, I think the Slosher Deco is an extremely fun weapon that has several strengths and, like the Vanilla Slosher, has a high skill ceiling where it will take time to master. I've seen some people call this variant one of the worst weapons in the game, and while Marker is not in the best place right now, I don't think we can rank this weapon on the same level as an Undercover Brella, for example. It's a difficult main weapon, a difficult sub, and a difficult special, which will take time to master. So obviously it's going to feel bad or look bad at first. So I recommend you give it a try, and you'll see that this thing can do some amazing things. Regardless, I think this weapon is extremely underrated, and the imagination a player can have for this kit is what makes this weapon thrive. Alright everybody, that is the end of part 2 for the Slosher Deco. For part 3, I'll cover the Soda Slosher when that weapon releases. I'm pretty sure it'll be that one, but nevertheless, for our next lineup, we're gonna go over the Tri-Slosher's kit. So look forward to that video in the future. I'm looking really forward to making this one for y'all. Hit that like button, subscribe, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and tag me on some cool Slosher Deco clips on Twitter. I'd love to see them. As always everyone, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.